Okay, good morning, everyone. This is the webinar for the Chicago COC on the HUD 2024 data standards updates. Again, welcome. Good morning. For the introductions for the all Chicago staff that are on the call, my name is Mike Corcoran. I'm the Director of Information Services and overall charge of the HMIS for the Chicago COC. Also with me are Alexander Fuller, who's our HMIS analyst, and Rochelle Fajardo, who is our training coordinator. I'll be starting out the presentation, and Rochelle will take over with more detailed information. In terms of the setup of the webinar, non-presenters are muted. If you have questions, please use the questions area to ask questions. We'll answer as many in real time as possible. In your controls in the control area, there should be a pull down for questions on the left side of your screen. If you click the arrow to expand that, there's an area where you can type your question in the text area and click the send button. And the materials in this webinar recording will be made available via URL link after we've completed it that we'll send out. So if you need to get at the information afterwards, it will be available as a resource to you. So for those of you unfamiliar with HMISs and with this process, you might be wondering what it is we're talking about. Why is this happening? What's happening? So the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, mandates that continuums of care must use a homeless management information system, which we abbreviate as HMIS. The HMIS must follow the HMIS data standards. HUD publishes the data standard, which define what the HMIS is and how it operates, what data is collected, what that data means, and all those sorts of things. We're required to follow that, and we're required to install any updates to that to be in compliance and for all of the federal reporting to work that we do and that your agencies do. Those standards are updated every 2 years at the start of the fiscal year, and the fiscal year begins on October 1st, 2023 for the 2024 fiscal year. The updates happen on even numbered fiscal years, so 2024 is a year when the standards are going to be updated. And HUD also mandates that the new data standards can't be implemented or available in the HMIS prior to the start of the fiscal year. They want all of the data to be consistent within a fiscal year. So the system will remain the same up until September 30th of 2023, and then magically on October 1st, 2024, it will be the new data standard that will be available to everybody who logs in. So on October 1st, 2023, our system will be updated to use those new 2024 HMIS data standards. HUD has published this calendar of events, and we won't spend a lot of time on this, but basically this work has been ongoing for quite a while. And HUD released the data standards to the vendors. Our HMIS is run by a third party that we subscribe to. They got the updated data standards in April. HUD published it to the rest of the world in May. This month, our vendors made available to us a sandbox site so we can start looking at what the new system is going to look like. And then on October 1st, the data standards go live, and SAGE is updated to accept fiscal year 2024 format APRs, CAPRs, and quoted entry APRs. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's important as well. In terms of our calendar, in the May and July agency technical administrator meetings, we presented and reviewed the data standards changes. In the COC newsletter, a couple of them, we provided links to a website called the HUD Exchange, where they had published the materials, the 2024 data standards. And now this month, We got access to the sandbox with the 2024 updates. We're conducting webinars today for HMIS users to inform them of what those changes are. During the rest of the month, we're available to meet with interested agencies to review how that's impacting your data collection and other affected processes, to help you work through any issues you might have. We're asking that agencies during this period of time assess and implement changes that will reflect the 2024 data standards. So what data you collect, how you collect the data, how you input the data, with whatever processes and forms or other methods for collecting that data, those will all need to change to collect the right data for 2024. We're also this month determining changes to assessments, determining changes to reports, implementing as many of those changes in the existing reports as possible. We would ask that if you have APRs and other reports due soon after October 1st, you run them early. In particular with APRs, the issue there, and we'll also reinforce this in the rest of the content. If you are currently working on an APR and you dump the data out and you're getting ready to upload it into Sage, if you run that report on September 28th and you try to upload it on October 2nd into Sage, it will not work. The format and the data content and all that kind of stuff are different, and all the systems are being updated to reflect that. And so to avoid any issues the first week of October, things like that, if you have your data ready the last week of September, upload it then. Otherwise, you may have to do rework and track down other errors and changes and things like that that might occur as a result of the update. And we are proposing that on Saturday, September 30th, we will run reports that would normally run on Mondays. The next Monday being October 2nd, just to account for any delays or things like that, we would run those reports and distribute them on Saturday rather than on Monday. Any questions so far? So then on October 1st is when the frenzy of activity starts. Our vendor is going to update our HMIS to the new data standard version. We don't have a committed time from them on when that's going to be completed. They're also going to update and migrate the existing data to the new data standard, and as we get into the detail, you'll see what that means. Again, we don't have a completion time from them as to when our system would be available. And then at some point, hopefully on October 1st, they make the system available to us. We need the HMIS team, our local HMIS team needs to go in and then update custom assessments, which we'll try to get done as quickly as possible. We'll update the project data because some of the definitions for individual projects are changing. We'll update custom reports. And again, the completion time on that is TBD because we're just now assessing what some of that stuff looks like now that we have some data from the vendor. And then we'll make the HMIS available to users. We don't know exactly what day or time that will be. And as I said at the bottom there, be prepared that the HMIS date may not be available to you on October 1st because we'll restrict access to it while we're making all these changes to make sure that the data, the system is ready for data to be entered correctly. Until we get the assessments updated, until we do a few other things, the data would not be entered correctly. You would get errors and things like that. And so that's why we need to restrict access and keep any errors from happening until we have all of the updates that we need to make implemented. I will now turn it over to Rochelle, and she can start going through the actual individual changes, unless there are questions on the stuff that I have that I've gone through so far. Okay, Rochelle, I'll turn it over to you.
Morning, everybody. I am Michelle Fajardo. I am the training coordinator for our Chicago HMIS team. Sorry, 1 second. Let me just set myself up. My presentation will be outlining the changes in our general data entry workflow due to these the 2024 data standard changes that was just outlined by Mike. So a big thing to kind of remember, as he just mentioned, that the current data in the system will be automatically mapped over to the new questions and the corresponding responses that's already been outlined by HUD for us on October 1st. So these are just what I'm going to be outlining are expected changes and change in the questions themselves as you move forward and update your client information, and as you move forward and put in new client data. So these are just changes to expect, but unless I indicate it, there's no need for anybody to go in and update their assessments. Some first general changes that I will be going over is just some wording changes. So a few of those would be a question that we previously had that was called client location. That will be now called enrollment COC. The same response is required. We're just indicating that we are from Illinois 510, which is the Chicago area. Same functionality, just the name of the question will be different. Another change in wording is within the prior living situation, there is a question that says approximate date homelessness started. That has now been clarified to say approximate date this episode of homelessness started. Again, just a change in the name of the question, just to clarify what it's asking for. Within the health insurance, one of the types of health insurance will be updated from Veterans Administration Medical Services to Veterans Health Administration. And then the final one will be that within just the standard other responses, client refused will now be changed to client prefers not to answer. Again, all of this information will be mapped over, so there's no need to go into any of the assessments that are already in the system to change those to the new responses. Those same questions will just be mapped over. Pause for a few minutes to see if there's any questions about just changes in these wording. Next thing we'll be going over is just some updates in the guidelines. The first one will be for the names of clients. So previously we request a legal name, but now client may provide a preferred name. Again, unless it is requested by a client, there's no need to change the name of any of our current clients. For Social Security, now only the last 4 digits will be required. Although collecting all 9 digits is not prohibited, except for a couple programs that actually require it for eligibility, which is SSVF and RIE projects. And then in addition to the Social Security number, so when you're enrolling a client that already has that 9-digit Social Security number, again, unless they specifically request it, we would leave that data as is. And as an added guideline for clients that do not have a Social Security number, select client doesn't know for Social Security data quality. Unfortunately, it will still get flagged as an error, but there is no, there's not a penalization for that, because we do understand that some clients won't have or will not want to provide a Social Security number, and except in cases for SSVF and RI projects that do require that social security number to verify eligibility. And then finally, the well-being data element, which is specific to permanent supportive housing projects. This data element will be retired and will no longer be available. If you see a question, would you still recommend choosing client prefers not to answer for cases where the client does not complete an exit interview? So that would depend on which question you're asking. These answers, client doesn't know or client refuses. Sorry, that's no wording changes over here. These answers, they're valid responses for HUD, and we should use them as such when client actually doesn't know or they would rather not answer. It's just they're not a replacement for data that's not collected. So if that is actually what happened with the client, please do choose that prefer not to answer response for that specific question. I also see a question that says, will we still use full Social Security collected or partial? Again, you can still collect the full Social Security number, and it is still recommended, except that only the last 4 digits will be required for per HUD. And then there was a question of saying, is there a way to add an option client doesn't have a Social Security number? And it was already answered with these responses are provided by HUD, so we cannot change them. And these guidelines are provided by them so that your data is accurately captured. Great questions. Please keep them coming. I'll pause for another minute to see if there's any more questions regarding the wording changes that I've gone over and these guideline updates for name, Social Security number. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So these next few will be one of the more significant changes that we'll see. So race and ethnicity will be combined. So this is going to look like that the old one had drop downs, and the new one will have a multi-select option and a text box to go with it. So that means that it will function kind of like the gender element that we had, where you would hold down a control button on your keyboard and then select different items. Hispanic, Latin and Latino, that will be the only option, meaning that if a client doesn't self-identify as Hispanic or Latino, then there's no need to select anything else outside of that. There will be also an added response for Middle Eastern or North African as one of the options in the race and ethnicity box. And then a additional text box to provide additional but optional detail. And that would look like if they select American Indian perhaps, or Hispanic and Latina, and they want to add that they are Puerto Rican or specifically from the Philippines or Mexican. So that would be the box you would place this question in. And then within this article that will be posted, there's also just a list that kind of describes what each response means and where and how to utilize those. I see a question in the box. It says, what is the best response for clients who do not come back to the program and do not complete the exit assessments? So that is determined by your own agency on what your standard protocol is for exiting clients. if you have further questions, please submit a ticket. I just want to make also sure that we have enough time to go over the data standards changes. And right now there's not any new guidelines regarding that. So for current workflow, I'd really suggest to just submit a ticket for that too, if you'd like to get more support in that way. But in terms of race and ethnicity, does anyone have any additional questions in that? Again, as a reminder, this is one that is also going to get mapped out by our vendor, so there should be no additional need to add or change any assessment information. There's a question that says, is there a multiracial option for race, or does client have to select the primary race option, then add additional information for the other races that may be applicable? So this is multi-select, although there are only a few in the pick list, just American Indian, Asian or Asian American, Black African American, Middle Eastern or North African, Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, and white. So you may select multiple of those. You can select them all if you'd like. And then you can just add extra information in the text box that isn't selectable. I hope that answers your question. To pause if there are other questions about race and ethnicity. Awesome. All right, I'm going to move on to gender. Gender will function the same. The pick list or choices of responses will be changing. So it will look very similar and function very similar, except that female will now be changed to woman or girl if child. Male will become man or boy if child. There will be an addition of culturally specific identity, for example, two-spirit. Gender other than that response will be changed to non-binary. And then there will be a new response option of saying different identity and a text box to add an extra detail of what that means for your client. So again, this specific data element will also be mapped, so no new updates need to be made immediately unless you do see that it is incorrectly mapped out or that something has changed. Questions about gender? Okay. Next thing that will change is that the destination and living situation section. I do see a question for what do you mean by two-spirit? So that is a culturally specific identity. Personally, I don't know what two-spirit means. It's specific to the identity of a culture. I'm making a large assumption that is an indigenous culture. And one more question regarding race. For data collection purposes, does a multi-selection race response count as one data point for multiracial clients? Can we say this many clients were multiracial, or will we be able to specifically say these many clients were multiracial for these specific races? So in terms, I think you're asking in terms of how it's going to be, you're asking in terms of how you're collecting the data. The data collection should be the same. In terms of how it's going to show up in reporting, they will say, it will say multiracial, and it would list each race. We'll pause on that and make sure to see if maybe Alex can clarify how this will show up in reports.
So the multiracial field is going to be multi-select. The output of it will be in a string, so it'll be one cell with all of the selected options the client selected. How we will analyze the data internally, I'm really not quite sure exactly how to give you an answer for that, but for your agency, if you have reports and once you pull it, you can kind of sort it or group it in any kind of way that your agency determines.
Yeah, so when there's a multiple selection, each selection is recorded in a single field for the client. So you could, when you report that data out, you can see that there are multiple values and just say this is a multiracial client. Or you could say in your reporting, when you see all of those, how many people identified as multiracial, including these races, right? So you have your option on how you report that. I'm not sure what mechanism you're using to report it, therefore I can't answer your next question, which is how you would analyze the data. But we can talk about that, offline as a help desk ticket or things like that. But the point to come away with is that as the data is entered, if you select multiple races, each one of the selections is recorded in a single field separated by commas for that client. So if you want to group them together and just say they're multiracial, you can do that. If you want to say, give me everybody who has either as a standalone or as a combination with other races, any particular racial identity that's in the list, you can do that also.
Awesome. Thank you guys for jumping in on that one. So the destination and living situations. I'm sure there's no more questions regarding those other ones. Okay, all right. How will these changes apply for already entered client profiles? Will items such as race for Latin people be previously marked as white plus ethnicity Hispanic need to be manually updated? So again, this question specifically, along with race and ethnicity, so race, ethnicity, and gender, destination, living situations, most of these updates, the data will be mapped over automatically. So for someone who has been marked white and Hispanic, then both white and Hispanic Latin will be marked automatically and mapped out for you. So there will be no need to kind of update already entered client profiles. We do suggest that, if once you go in and update them for other updates, just make sure that all the questions are still, they still match your data. So it's always still good practice to review and make sure that assessment data is still accurate. So nothing outside of the normal review of your assessments will be needed. Okay. So destination and living situations. So this pick list will have been, is going to be reorganized, and then a conditional logic question will be added. So this pick list will be is usually found in the prior living situation, which is in the entry assessment. Current living situation, sub-assessment found in all the assessments, and the exit destination found in the exit assessment when you are creating one. So as of right now, this is kind of what the pick list looks like. This is specifically for the prior living situation within the entry assessment. So we have it broken out in homeless situation, institutional, and temporary and permanent housing situation, along with the other at the bottom. Now it will be updated to separate that temporary and permanent situations. So now there's going to be a separate heading for temporary, a separate heading for permanent. There's going to be a dependency. Again, as I mentioned, there's going to be this a conditional logic. So that means that if you select rental by client with ongoing housing subsidy, a second question will pop up under it, which will look like this. Second question is going to be called rental subsidy type. So again, if once I select rental by client with ongoing housing subsidy, a second question under it will appear with a pick list of all the subsidies that is available in our community, with 3 new ones that were previously not included in the old pick list, which is the Housing Stability Voucher, Family Unification Program Voucher, and the Foster Youth to Independence Initiative. So those will be added. So this is another one of those where if client profiles have already been entered, it will be automatically mapped out. The only case where you do need to double check for completion and accuracy is if your client is receiving one of these new subsidized responses, Housing Stability Voucher, the Family Unification, and the Foster Youth Independence Initiative. The question here that says, what option would we choose for EHV exits? So there is still an EHV option in here. That will be already mapped out. I will look into that. I actually don't see it right here. So, Sarah, if you could send a, okay, got it. Thanks, Dana, for that clarification. So I will take a note of this and look over the documentation and see what option should be best. And I will reach out to both of you or to Sarah. Thank you. I see that there's a comment from Gladys saying to use HCV for EHV. Again, I'll clarify and look through some documentation for us and make sure to follow up with some updated guidelines. Awesome. Then we'll make sure to add it in the document, in the follow-up email where we send out all these links to the webinar and slides afterwards. Thank you for that question. Any other follow-up questions in terms of the new pick list for the destinations and living situation? Thank you guys for that information. Look at that. Awesome. If there's no more questions in terms of this pick list, the next thing will be this translation assistance needed element. So this is a new data element. So contrary to the other items, this will need to be updated. This is the one question that really would need to be updated because it's brand new. This will be found in the entry assessment. Will you be sending out the update? Yep, we'll be sending out the updated pick list. Part of the article, we will provide kind of like a document that maps out old pick lists to new pick lists to kind of to reflect these changes and help you update the data collection that you have internally. It'll be a separate slide we kind of figured that wouldn't be necessary to kind of include in this. So translation assistance needed. So this data element is brand new. It will be found in the entry assessment, and it will be collected from the head of household. So essentially it will look like this. At the bottom, it's a translation assistance needed with the standard pick list of yes, no, client doesn't know, prefers not to answer, data not collected. If you select yes, a second conditional logic question will pop up with a list of predetermined and locally determined list of languages, along with the standard HUD questions, and if different preferred language, a text box available for that. So as of right now, since this is a new data element, as I mentioned, make sure to add a response to this required question the next time you update your client record. And to begin, kind of when this is launched on October 1st, we'll just be providing a locally determined list. And as it's used over the upcoming months, we'll make some changes to reflect the needs of the community. So if any languages that you see your community, your specific area uses a lot and isn't in the pick list and you think should be added, please reach out in the upcoming months, because we still need to kind of cut down the list of languages available, just so it matches what our community needs. Do you have any questions in terms? Let's see that we've got a suggestion for French. Awesome. We'll definitely take note of that as we put together just kind of a general list to start with. Thanks, Rachel. Again, this data element will be found in the entry assessment. Will this default to blank for existing clients or as no translation needed? You still need to answer the question. So there is an option to say no, that they don't need translation assistance. And if you do select no, that those second and third questions will not pop up. And I see a question. Can someone explain the reasoning behind requiring the last 4 digits be collected? Is it to verify that someone with a similar name or is a different person? If so, wouldn't that date of birth satisfy that? So these requirements are set by HUD. They're not something we can specifically change, but the main purpose they do use social security number is to make sure that it's kind of the one data element that is unique to every person. So it's the one way that we can really determine the different, that we can prevent data duplication. Previously, it was required that all 9 social security digits to be collected. They actually cut it down to the last 4. Unfortunately, date of birth wouldn't be useful because there are people who have similar birth dates. If translation assistance is needed, by answering this question, will a referral for assistance be offered to agency? As of right now, my understanding is that this is only for data collection purposes to determine the need for this assistance in the future, but I will look further as well to see if there is any other next steps guideline in regards to this question, but that is a great question. More additional questions about translation or any other elements I've covered thus far. So these next three sections are going to be very specific to HAPWA, RAI, and VA. So first one is HAPWA. So these are only, I think there are only a few, very few projects in our COC that actually is HAPWA. So just some changes in their assessments is that there's the services provided, some wording changes where this order will be removed from the response option. It will just be called substance abuse services and treatment. Medical assistance section for the HAPWA assessment is that they are removing the receiving public HIV/AIDS medical assistance field, so that is no longer going to be available. And then finally, in the exit assessment for HAPWA, the option for client went to jail and prison and client died, those options are going to be updated to just jail, prison, and deceased. Again, these questions are only found in the HUD HAPWA assessments. If you do not belong to a program that is HAPWA funded, then this does not is not relevant to you. And these questions will also be mapped over, so no additional actions needed for those who do use this assessment. Pausing for questions. Benisha, can you please go to slide that this is bigger? Which slide are you referring to? Is this what you're referring to? This image? Okay. So again, this is only if you have a HAPWA project. You would not see this question if you don't have if you don't normally complete HAPWA assessments. All right. Okay, so RAI elements. So these are elements only found in the HHS RAI assessments. RAI being runaway youth, I believe. So RAI service connections, again, so some wording changes will be changed from mother to client, person who gave birth. The project completion status and counseling, it will be changed from youth to client, and just a couple wording changes. No further steps needed. This is only for RAI assessments. Any additional questions regarding these RAI element changes? Okay. And then finally, VA elements. These are only found in the VA SSVF assessments. The first change will be that within the client information, the veteran information, they have added the option to select Space Force as one of the branches of military, if that is something your client is part of. That was not one of the options before. Services provided, some wording changes from subsidy to shallow subsidy. Financial assistance, some more wording changes for that. From date of financial assistance to start date of financial assistance, added the options of landlord and tenant incentive, and added an end date of the financial assistance. The percent of AMI, which is required for SSVF eligibility, has been updated. Previously, there was only 3 options for less than 30%, 30 to 50, and greater than 50. Now it's been broken up to be more granular. So 30 or less, 31 to 50, 51 to 80, and 81 or greater. So that has been updated. Last permanent address, it will be retired. And then the homeless prevention targeting criteria, some wording changes will take effect. So instead of history of literal homelessness, it will be past experience of homelessness. And then addition of renter of unit to the head of household questions, and the addition of guardian to the parent question. General questions regarding homelessness prevention. For any assessment where there are optional questions, non-HUD related questions, how can we go about editing the assessment to reduce the amount of time it takes to complete the assessment? An example would be the homeless prevention call center client assessment where there are optional questions that are non-HUD related. What is the process for getting optional questions removed? So assessment questions are determined by the HMIS committee. So that's not something that we can change right away. If you or your agency is interested in discussing kind of very specific agency needs, we submit a ticket so we can discuss it offline. But just kind of as a general rule, we can't really edit the assessment questions kind of right away. We have to kind of put it forth the HMIS committee. But that is something we're kind of working on, is just work streamlining our assessments for us. Which brings me to our next slide here. Some general workflow changes for everybody to kind of expect. The names of assessments will just be changing from 2002 to 2004 to 2024. So just expect that they'll be changing there, just so you know that you're completing the right ones. And then within the assessment themselves, we will be changing the view so that only the relevant assessment will populate for that assessment, rather than being able to see them all at once. I see your question, Lauren. I will go back to that screen after I complete this piece, okay? So for example of this is that in this specific project, users should be completing the DFSS, IEDH assessment, and entry assessment in the entry. So you would only be able to see those two. So we're in entry assessment, you'd only be able to see these two assessments. For the update assessment, you're not going to see them all anymore. So for this specific example here, for the interim review, they only have the HUD update assessment required or assigned to them. So you're actually not even seeing that box that allows you to navigate between assessments. Similarly for this exit assessment here. So when you enter the exit assessment, you're going to be taken directly to this exit assessment, and you won't even have the choice to move between them. So hopefully this will lessen kind of the confusion around which assessment needs to be completed when, navigating between them, and lessening that burden. But the question about the AMI ranges right here. So these ranges are only changing for SSVF VA projects, just so you know. So all the other projects, the AMI section will look the same and will not change. There is a question about, is that the same for annual assessment? So this specific sample that I have for that assessment, this is a project that doesn't need to do annual assessment. So if your project will need to do as annual assessments, then you would expect to see update and annual assessment in the usual navigation box here. And when can we expect to receive the slides? So the slides will be posted by the end of today. There is another webinar later this afternoon targeting with a focus on reporting that Alex will be leading. So after both webinars are complete, it does take a few hours for the recording to be ready, but they will be posted to the public by the end of today and at the latest tomorrow. And we'll provide that slide in a follow-up email along with answers to a couple notes that I have here regarding HIV EHB exits here. Any questions about the general workflow changes regarding the way the assessments are going to look moving forward? Regarding the names of the assessments? And final next steps here. So again, this slide deck and webinar recording will be posted in the article, and I will also add this recording to the current introduction HMIS courses where it's relevant. So we're going to add that as a module, just kind of as an update to the training. Future training, as we continue to update the training, it will have these features, but as of right now, there's not a separate training that will be needed for this. It'll just be available for like new users. And again, as another reminder from earlier with the data standards changing, the APR will also have some changes. So remember, just as a reminder to submit your reports early to avoid any issues after that. After these webinars, if you or anyone in your agency needs specialized data entry support in regards to training, these data entry changes, or anything in regards to the data standards changes, specifically for your agency or your users, please reach out to us for any of that support. We'd love to help in any way we can. And if there are any other questions, we have just a few minutes left in the webinar. I'm going to bring Mike back to kind of help us close out.
Thanks, Rochelle. Again, this is going to be the slides that Rochelle went through are going to be a help desk article. This is the format that we do a lot of our help desk articles in. So in addition to distributing, if you want to, I don't know if you can download a copy of it, but we'll certainly provide the link so that everyone can go and view this at their leisure and use it as a reference point. And as Rochelle said, and as I said at the beginning, if there are things specific to your agency that you want to discuss and work through to make sure that whatever your processes are, whatever your data collection format and operations are, if you need our help in reviewing any of that stuff and making sure that this transition is as smooth as possible, please let us know. And again, I apologize for the uncertainty about the schedule on October 1st and maybe bleeding into October 2nd, but there's lots of things we don't know yet in terms of how long it will take for some of this processing to occur and when the system will actually be turned over to us. So we'll be communicating out via email to all users as we have for these webinars to let you know status and let you know when the system is available for use again. And after October 1st, again, if there's any kinds of issues that you're encountering, either with any of the data migration or operational issues or reporting issues or things like that, again, don't hesitate to contact us post migration so that, again, we can make sure systems functioning in the way that you need it to. If there's no further questions, we can close it out. So one last 15 or 20 seconds for any further questions. Otherwise, again, thank you for attending. We appreciate your involvement in all of this, and we will keep you posted as things progress over the course of the month with any other updates. Okay. Thanks again, everyone. We'll end the webinar now then.